My name is Brooke. The evening that changed everything began when my mother lifted her wine glass and declared, "Your sister is successful and responsible, unlike you. She doesn't need help from anyone." The dining room fell into an eerie silence, as if someone had pressed mute on the entire world. My fork stopped midway to my plate while I stared at my mother in disbelief, then shifted my gaze to my perfect sister sitting across the table, absorbing the compliment like she deserved every word. What nobody at that dinner understood was that I had been transferring $3,200 into her bank account every single month for the past 2 years, just so she could maintain the illusion that her life was perfectly put together. Successful and responsible, doesn't need help from anyone. Those words echoed in my mind like painful slaps across my face. Heat rushed to my cheeks, but this time it wasn't shame burning through me. This was pure, undiluted rage building inside. My mother beamed with obvious pride, completely unaware of the truth, before adding with emphasis, "You see, Brooke, some people just know how to stand on their own 2 feet." Something inside me finally shattered at that moment. I shoved my chair backward, the legs making a harsh scraping sound against the wooden floor, and I forced myself to smile even though it felt like shards of glass cutting into my mouth. "You're absolutely right, Mom," I said while keeping my eyes locked firmly on my sister's face. "It's wonderful that she doesn't need help from anyone." I paused to draw a deep breath before dropping the bomb I had never even dared to imagine unleashing before this very moment. So my monthly transfers of $3,200 end today. The blood drained completely from my sister's face in an instant. My mother's proud smile collapsed like a demolished building. My father finally lifted his eyes from his dinner plate. For the first time in what felt like years, every single person at that table was staring directly at me. They had absolutely no idea that one simple sentence was about to completely tear apart the golden child illusion they had been worshipping for so long. If you want to witness how that single statement shattered my sister's carefully constructed perfect image and forced my entire family to finally choose a side, stay with me until the very end. After that disastrous dinner ended, I drove myself home with trembling hands gripping the steering wheel while my mother's cruel words continued echoing relentlessly in my skull. "Successful and responsible, unlike you. I'm 29 years old now. I maintain a stable career that pays my bills consistently. I cover all my own expenses without asking anyone for help. And yet I've been quietly channeling $3,200 every month to my sister so she could keep her fantasy life afloat. Somehow, in their eyes, I'm still the irresponsible one. Make that make any kind of sense. The instant I walked through my apartment door, I dropped my keys on the counter, yanked out my phone, pulled up my banking application, and scrolled through the endless list of completed transfers. Month after month stretched before me, showing the same recipient name and the same dollar amount, dozens upon dozens of payments totaling tens of thousands of dollars gone from my account. How many times had I convinced myself this was just temporary and that she would get back on her feet soon? How many times had I believed her stories about the brutal industry and being so close to landing a big break? And if she really was as successful as everyone claimed, why did she still desperately need my money just to survive? The truth settled heavily in my chest like a cold stone. I wasn't simply helping my sister anymore. I was actively financing the lie that she was somehow better than me. Childhood memories started flooding back, crashing into my mind all at once. Birthday parties where my achievements were quickly skimmed over so my sister's trophies could be displayed front and center for everyone to admire. Parent-teacher conferences where my solid grades were dismissed as fine, while her slightly better ones were praised as absolutely brilliant. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" had practically become our family's unofficial motto over the years. Maybe that explained why, when she first called me several years ago, crying desperately about losing a job and urgently needing financial help, I had immediately said yes without even thinking it through. Perhaps I had been trying desperately to prove that I was a good daughter too, even though nobody ever applauded my efforts. But somewhere along this painful journey, helping her had gradually transformed into enabling her destructive patterns, and my love had slowly turned into quiet, burning resentment. I thought back carefully to all the impressive details I'd heard about her amazing job over the years. Whenever my parents discussed her career, it sounded like they were reading from a glossy brochure. Big, prestigious firm, fast track to management, handling important clients. Yet every single time I asked my sister directly about her work, she would become strangely vague and dismissive. "You wouldn't understand corporate politics," she'd say with a condescending laugh. Or she'd wave her hand and say, "It's complicated, but it pays extremely well." Then quickly follow up with, "By the way, could you possibly send the transfer a little earlier this month?" How does someone with a steady, impressive job still desperately need $3,200 every month from her supposedly not so successful little sister? Why hadn't anyone else in our family ever questioned that glaring inconsistency? I realized with painful clarity that I had spent years deliberately looking away because believing the comfortable story was so much easier than digging for the uncomfortable truth. That dinner had violently ripped the blindfold off my eyes. If she was genuinely thriving in her career, my financial support shouldn't matter at all to her survival. So, why did she look like I had just violently yanked the floor out from under her feet? I lay completely awake that entire night, staring blankly at my bedroom ceiling while replaying her panicked expression over and over in my mind. What exactly was she hiding from everyone? What had I actually been funding all this time? And if I completely pulled my financial support out, would she finally learn to stand on her own 2 feet? Or would her entire carefully constructed world come crashing down around her? I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was completely done being the quiet, invisible ATM machine running in the background while my parents continued worshiping their golden child. If I truly wanted real answers, I desperately needed someone who had seen her life up close without the carefully applied family filter. Someone who didn't have any reason to lie to me about what they knew. My thoughts immediately landed on a specific name from our shared past. Someone who had attended college with her and had managed to stay in touch over the years. Maybe he actually knew who she really was now, not the carefully polished version my family constantly bragged about to everyone. My heart pounded hard in my chest as I pulled out my phone and opened his social media profile. My fingers hovered uncertainly over the keyboard for several long moments before finally typing out a message. "Hey, it's Brooke. I need to ask you something important about my sister. Do you have time to talk?" I hit send, stared anxiously at the screen, and wondered nervously whether I was about to confirm my worst suspicions or discover something even worse than I had imagined. His reply came back much faster than I had expected. "Hey, Brooke. Wow, it's been quite a while since we talked. Sure, what's going on? Want to grab coffee somewhere and catch up?" My stomach twisted into uncomfortable knots. This wasn't about casually catching up on old times. This was about me digging up the truth my family had conveniently never bothered to ask for. Still, I quickly agreed to meet him. And a few hours later, I found myself sitting in a corner booth of a small, quiet cafe with my shoulders tight with tension and my fingers wrapped tightly around a coffee cup I was far too anxious to actually drink from. He walked through the door, waved cheerfully in my direction, and smiled warmly, like this was just another perfectly normal day. For me, it felt exactly like walking into a courtroom to face judgment. After a brief bit of polite small talk that I barely registered hearing, I finally decided to cut straight to the chase. "I need to ask you something specific about my sister," I said, my voice coming out quieter than I had intended. "My family keeps talking constantly about this amazing job she supposedly has, about how she's on the fast track to becoming a manager, and how she's so incredibly successful and responsible." I hesitated for just a moment, then decided to stop sugar-coating the situation. "But I've been sending her $3,200 every single month for 2 full years. If she's really doing as well as everyone claims, why would she possibly need all that money from me?" His eyes widened dramatically in obvious shock. "You've been sending her what amount?" he asked, leaning forward across the table. "Brooke, she mentioned to me that you help her out sometimes financially, but I honestly thought it was like the occasional small favor, not." He shook his head slowly from side to side. "That's a tremendous amount of money to be sending anyone." Cold anger slowly crept up my spine like ice water. "So, what's really going on with her?" I pressed him firmly. Has she actually been working at that big prestigious firm she constantly tells our parents about? Is she genuinely in some fancy management position? Or is that entire story completely made up? He sighed heavily and ran one hand through his hair with obvious discomfort. Last time I heard anything specific, she wasn't working at any big firm, he said carefully, choosing his words with caution. She did have a job at one point a while ago, but she ended up getting fired from it and was doing freelance work after that happened. She told people she was consulting and strategically between offers. I never heard anything concrete about a stable, permanent position. Definitely nothing that came close to matching what you're describing to me right now. The cafe noise around us faded into a dull, distant hum as his words fully sank into my consciousness. Fired, freelance work, strategically between offers. He hesitated again before continuing. Honestly, it always felt to me like she was desperately trying to keep up a specific image for everyone around her. Designer outfits at every event, expensive weekend brunches, frequent trips to exotic locations. She always insisted she had everything completely covered financially. I just naturally assumed she could actually afford that lifestyle somehow. My mind flashed rapidly through all the countless times she had told me with tears in her voice that she was barely managing to survive, that she desperately needed my help, promising it was just until the big promotion finally clears, or just until I managed to pay off this one critical thing. I pictured clearly all the glamorous vacation photos she had posted publicly. Beautiful beaches, trendy rooftop bars, brand new designer handbags prominently displayed, while I had been eating leftover meals and clipping grocery coupons every week because things are really tight right now financially. Had I really been directly funding her entire luxury lifestyle while she played elaborate pretend for everyone else in her life? Did she ever say anything specific about our parents? I asked, my voice getting noticeably sharper with rising anger. About me personally? He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Look, I really don't want to deliberately stir up family drama, he started cautiously. Please, I interrupted firmly. I'm already drowning in it. Just tell me the truth. He exhaled slowly before responding. She complained sometimes that your parents were constantly on her back about things, and that you were being controlling with money. She said you liked to hold it over her head, that you were jealous of her success, and actively trying to make her feel like a complete failure. For a long moment, I genuinely forgot how to breathe properly. Jealous, controlling, holding money over her head as leverage. Was that the twisted story she had been telling everyone to justify bleeding me completely dry financially? A bitter laugh escaped from my throat. So let me get this absolutely straight, I said, desperately trying to keep my voice reasonably level. I work extremely hard at my job, wire her thousands of dollars every single month without fail, keep her dirty secrets so our parents won't worry themselves sick, and somehow in her version of events, I'm the villain of this entire story? He watched me carefully, with obvious concern. I'm not saying she was right about any of it, he said softly. I'm just telling you exactly what I heard from her perspective. From the outside looking in, it honestly always appeared like she was living this amazing, perfectly polished life. If you hadn't just told me about all the money you've been sending, I would never have guessed in a million years that she needed any help at all. Something deep inside me hardened into cold steel. This wasn't simply about enabling destructive behavior anymore. This was about complete betrayal of my trust. I had sacrificed my own savings account, delayed my personal plans repeatedly, and twisted myself into emotional knots trying to protect her precious image. And in return, she had painted me as the jealous, controlling sister to anyone who would listen. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking application again, turning the screen so he could clearly see the long, endless string of payment transfers. This, I said, my voice coming out completely flat and emotionless, is what I've been doing for her month after month. While everyone constantly praises her for being so incredibly independent. He looked genuinely stunned by what he was seeing. Brooke, that's completely messed up, he said with clear disapproval. She absolutely shouldn't be taking advantage of you like that and lying on top of everything else. That's not okay by any measure. On the drive home afterward, my thoughts were no longer simply questions bouncing around. They were firm decisions forming piece by piece in my mind. If she desperately wanted to live a lie, that was fine by me. But she was going to do it entirely without my money from now on. And if my parents absolutely insisted on worshiping the golden child, they were going to do it with their eyes wide open for once in their lives. I scrolled methodically through her social media accounts, taking screenshots of her luxury weekend getaways, her posts about hard-earned rewards, all the expensive handbags I could never justify buying for myself. Then I opened my banking statements and exported 3 full years of transfer records. The numbers looked absolutely obscene when laid out on paper like that. This wasn't loving support between sisters. This was a one-woman funding operation for someone else's elaborate fantasy life. I stared at all the evidence gathered on my screen and felt something fierce rising powerfully in my chest. For the first time in this entire situation, I wasn't just hurt and confused. I was ready to fight back with everything I had. Why am I the only one paying for her lies? I whispered quietly to myself in the empty car. Why does she get all the applause while I get stuck with the bill every month? I knew exactly what I had to do next. I wasn't going to argue about vague rumors or hurt feelings. I was going to walk directly into her perfectly curated world carrying hard proof and force her to choose between the truth or watching the complete collapse of everything she had built. And if the golden child didn't like it, that was too bad for her. The free ride was already over, whether she accepted it or not. The only question left was exactly how loudly it would all come crashing down around her. I didn't announce my visit in advance. I wanted to see her life exactly as it really was, not the carefully cleaned-up version she rolled out whenever she had advanced time to prepare everything. When I finally arrived at her apartment building, the lobby alone practically screamed money at me. Polished marble floors, soft designer lighting, an elegant concierge desk that I knew for certain wasn't cheap to maintain. It was funny how someone supposedly struggling to survive could still afford to live in a place like this while I was squeezing every single dollar just to make my basic rent and send her that $3,200 each month. I rode the elevator up to her floor, my phone buzzing with nervous anxiety in my coat pocket, my shoulder bag heavy with printed bank statements and screenshots. This time I wasn't coming as the supportive, understanding sister. I was coming as the one who had paid for absolutely everything and finally wanted a detailed receipt. She opened her apartment door with a bright, well-practiced smile plastered across her face. "Brooke, I wasn't expecting you to visit today," she said in a sugary, sweet voice. "Come in, please come in." The apartment interior looked like a designer showroom pulled straight from a magazine. Stylish furniture positioned perfectly, expensive decor items displayed prominently, not a single visible sign of real financial struggle anywhere. No second-hand couch salvaged from someone's curb, no bare walls waiting for artwork she couldn't afford, no evidence whatsoever of someone barely scraping by each month. My jaw clenched tightly. "Nice place you have here," I said slowly, letting the words hang heavily in the air between us. "Must be a great job paying for all this." She laughed it off casually. "You know how it is in my industry. Long, exhausting hours, but it definitely pays off in the end. I actually told Mom and Dad about my recent promotion just last week. They're so incredibly proud of me." My stomach turned violently. Proud of a completely fabricated story she had carefully stitched together while I quietly funded her actual reality behind the scenes. "I'm sure they are extremely proud," I replied with barely concealed anger. "Maybe you can explain to me exactly how that promotion works, though, because I talked to someone recently who seems to remember you very differently than the story you're telling." Her confident smile faltered noticeably. "What are you talking about?" she asked with obvious confusion. I didn't make her wait another second. I pulled the thick stack of papers from my bag and dropped them with a heavy thud on her pristine coffee table. 3 years' worth of bank statements, I said clearly. Every single $3,200 transfer, every month without fail. My money leaving my account, your name on the receiving end. I pulled out my phone and opened the Photos application. "And here," I added while flipping through screenshot after screenshot, "are your expensive vacations, designer bags, fancy brunches, nights out at exclusive clubs. I looked up at her face. Tell me which part of this lifestyle looks like someone desperately fighting to survive in a brutal industry? Her face completely drained of all color. Brooke, this is invasive and inappropriate, she snapped defensively. You're going through my entire life like you somehow own it. I raised one eyebrow. When I've literally paid for most of it month after month. Yeah, I think I've earned the right to ask a few basic questions. Her eyes flashed with sudden anger. I never asked you to make a dramatic show of it, she said sharply. You offered to help me back then. Now you're throwing it in my face just to make yourself feel superior to me. I almost laughed out loud at the absurdity. Superior? You told people I was controlling, that I was jealous of your success, that I held money over your head like some kind of weapon. Meanwhile, you let Mom stand there and call you successful and responsible while I'm treated like the family disappointment. Every single time. She crossed her arms defensively and started pacing. So, what do you want, Brooke? An apology written in gold? A thank you card delivered every month? Do you want everyone to stand up and clap because you're such a martyr? The way she twisted absolutely everything made my skin crawl with disgust. I want the actual truth, I said sharply. Are you working at that big firm or not? Are you actually on track for some management promotion? Or have you been lying to Mom and Dad this entire time while living completely off my income? The tense silence stretched unbearably until she finally cracked under the pressure. No, I'm not at that firm, she spat out bitterly. I never was. I interviewed there once. I didn't get the position. I panicked about what to tell everyone. And I told them I did get it. I thought it would buy me some time until I could land something real and make it true. But things kept falling through repeatedly. And the lie just got bigger and bigger. And my money? I asked coldly. What exactly did you use it for every month? She looked away toward the window. Rent, bills, some other necessary stuff, she muttered vaguely. I narrowed my eyes. Other stuff like expensive vacations, designer bags, luxury items you pretended you earned yourself while I was juggling extra shifts and saying no to things I actually wanted. She suddenly exploded. I was drowning, she shouted loudly. Every single time I talked to Mom and Dad, all they saw was the golden child who couldn't possibly fail. I had to keep up that image. Do you have any idea what that kind of pressure feels like? I stared at her in complete disbelief. Do you have any idea what it feels like to be the backup daughter who constantly bails the golden child out and still gets told she's not good enough? I shot back. You chose to lie to everyone. You chose to use me as your silent sponsor. You chose to make me the villain in your story so you could keep being the hero in theirs. She grabbed a coffee mug from the table and slammed it down so hard that coffee splashed over the polished wood surface. So what now? She demanded. You cut me off completely and what? Watch me crash and burn? Watch everyone turn on me? Is that what you really want? Are you happy now that you finally have something to hold over me? I held her angry gaze without flinching. What I want, I said quietly but firmly, is for you to stop treating my life like collateral for your precious image. The transfers stopped the exact moment Mom announced you didn't need help from anyone. You're right about one thing. This isn't my responsibility anymore. You get to live with the story you created all by yourself. For the first time, real panic settled visibly in her eyes. Not theatrical manipulation, not practiced tears, just raw, genuine fear. Brooke, I can't pay next month's rent without that money, she whispered desperately. I have bills piling up, debts I owe, people who expect things from me. You can't just pull out now. I tilted my head slightly. Funny. That sounds exactly like needing help from someone. You should tell Mom that next time she brags about how independent you are. She reached desperately for my arm. Please, just one more month of support. I'll fix everything, I swear. I'm so close to landing something big. I just need a little more time. How many times had I heard those exact words before? How many times had I chosen to believe them despite all evidence? I pulled my arm back firmly. No, I said with absolute certainty. I'm done sacrificing my future, so you can keep pretending you've already made it. I walked steadily toward the door, feeling her desperate stare burning into my back. "If you won't help me," she called out, desperation creeping heavily into her voice, "then at least don't ruin everything. Don't tell them. They don't need to know the truth." I paused with my hand on the doorknob. "That's the problem," I said without turning around. "They should have known a long time ago. Maybe if they had been paying attention instead of worshiping the idea of you, none of this would have gotten this far." I walked out, letting the door click shut firmly behind me. My heart pounded hard. My palms were sweaty. But underneath all the adrenaline was something new and powerful, a sharp, steady sense of control. For once in my life, I wasn't the silent, overlooked daughter. For once, I held the truth and the choice of what to do with it. The question was no longer, can I keep supporting her? It was, how far am I willing to go to finally end this golden child myth? I thought cutting off the money would be the hardest part of this entire situation. I was completely wrong. The real storm started when my mother called me 2 days later. Her voice was bright and oblivious to reality. "Brooke, you should be nicer to your sister," she scolded me lightly. "She told me you were being difficult with her. She's under a lot of pressure at work right now. They're talking about giving her even more responsibility now that she's handling those big, important clients. You could learn something valuable from her dedication." I stared at my phone in stunned disbelief. Even now, my sister was spinning the story in her favor. She was probably sitting in that overpriced apartment, surrounded by things I had paid for, telling our mother that I was just being difficult while she worked so incredibly hard. I felt something inside me snap decisively into place. "Enough, Mom," I said slowly and clearly. "How exactly do you think she's paying for that lifestyle you're so proud of?" There was a pause. "Well, from her job, of course," my mother replied, as if it were completely obvious. "She's successful, Brooke. She doesn't lean on anyone like you always seem to." The irony almost knocked the air completely out of my lungs. I pulled my laptop closer, opened the folder I had carefully created, and stared at the evidence laid out in front of me. Screenshots, bank statements, timestamps, dollar amounts, vacation photos with captions like, "When hard work pays off." How many lies could a family swallow before choking? "Mom," I said, my voice becoming firmer. "We need to talk in person. All of us. You, Dad, me, and her. At your place tonight." She sounded taken aback.
"Why?"
"Did something happen?" "Yes," I answered. "Something has been happening for a long time. You just haven't wanted to see it." There was a long silence before she finally agreed. "Fine, come for dinner. But Brooke, I don't want any drama." I almost laughed. "That depends on whether you prefer the truth or the performance you've been clapping for." That evening, I walked into my parents' house with my laptop tucked under my arm and my heart beating like a drum. My father sat in his usual chair, scrolling through his phone, half interested in the world around him. My mother fussed in the kitchen, setting the table for 4. "She's running late," Mom said apologetically. "You know how it is with important jobs." "Yeah," I replied. "I know exactly how it is." We sat down, and before the food even hit the table, I opened my laptop. "We're going to wait for her," my mother protested. "We don't need her here for this part," I said, meeting her eyes. "We need you two to hear something first." I pulled up the first bank statement. "For the last 3 years," I began, "I've been sending your successful and responsible daughter $3,200 every month." My father finally looked up. "What?" he asked, frowning. "Why would you do that?" My mother looked offended. "That can't be right. If anyone was sending anyone money, it would be your sister sending it to you. She's the one with the career." "No, Mom," I said, turning the screen so they could see the long list of transfers. "These are my accounts. That's my money, and that's her name. You can match the dates with this 'she's doing so well' speeches if you want. It lines up perfectly." Their faces shifted from disbelief to shock as they skimmed the records. My father cleared his throat. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "She told us." "She told you what you wanted to hear." I cut in. "Big firm, promotion, big clients. Meanwhile, she's been unemployed or freelancing at best. She's been using my money to pay her rent, bills, and whatever else keeps her image polished enough to earn your praise. My mother shook her head, clinging to denial. That doesn't sound like her. She's always been so driven. I clicked to the folder of screenshots. Driven enough to use my money for this? I asked, flipping through images of vacations, luxury dinners, designer bags. Captioned, treating myself after a long week at the office. What office, Mom? The one that only exists in her Instagram captions. There was a knock at the door. My mother jumped, grateful for the interruption, and went to open it. My sister walked in, dressed impeccably as always, greeting them with their kisses and practiced charm. When she saw me with my laptop open, her smile flickered. "What's going on?" she asked cautiously. "We're having a family talk," I said. "Don't worry. You're the star of the show, like always." My mother motioned for her to sit. "Your sister is making some strange claims," she said nervously. "She thinks we don't know you the way we think we do." My sister's eyes narrowed slightly. "Brooke, what are you doing?" I took a deep breath. "I'm done being your silent sponsor while you paint me as the jealous underachiever," I said. "I've shown them the transfers, the $3,200 every month for 2 years. I've shown them the vacations, the bags, the dinners, all the things you credited to your big promotion. So go ahead, tell them again how independent you are." Her face hardened. "This is pathetic," she spat. "You're so obsessed with tearing me down that you've turned into a stalker. Going through my posts, my life. Do you realize how unhealthy that is? Do you realize how unhealthy it is to build your life on lies and my bank account?" I shot back. "You lied to them. You lied to me. You built a throne out of my sacrifices and then let them compare me to you like I was garbage." My father leaned forward, voice low and dangerous. "Is it true?" he asked. "Did you lie about your job?" My sister's eyes darted between us. For the first time, she seemed genuinely cornered. "I exaggerated," she muttered. "I had interviews at that firm. I did some contract work. It's not like I did nothing." "You told us you were a manager," my mother whispered, clutching the edge of the table. "You told us they relied on you." My sister's jaw clenched. "I was going to get there," she insisted. "I just needed time. If Brooke hadn't cut me off—" "Don't you dare blame this on me," I interrupted. "You had time. You had money. You had support. Instead of using it to actually fix your situation, you used it to keep pretending you were already successful." The room buzzed with tension. My mother's eyes filled with tears, not just of hurt, but of humiliation. "All those times I bragged about you," she whispered. "All those times I used you as an example to your sister." Her voice broke. And all along, she was the one actually standing on her own. My sister glared at me. "Are you happy now?" she hissed. "You've destroyed me. They'll never look at me the same way again." I held her gaze without flinching. "You destroyed yourself," I said quietly. "You decided that being honest wasn't good enough. You decided that using me was easier than admitting you were struggling. This isn't revenge for nothing. This is the bill finally coming due." My father sat back, his face grim. "The money stops," he said. "From everyone. There will be no more lies in this house. If you want to rebuild, you do it honestly. No secret transfers, no fake promotions." My mother nodded slowly, still shaken. "And you," she added, turning to me, "should never have had to carry this alone." The words landed like something I'd been waiting my whole life to hear. For the first time, I wasn't the disappointing daughter sitting in the shadow of the golden child. I was the one who had kept everything from collapsing completely and then finally let it fall. My sister shot up from her chair, eyes blazing, and grabbed her bag. "Fine," she snapped. "Cut me off. See if I care." But the slight tremor in her voice betrayed her. She headed for the door, then turned back to me. "You think you've won," she said. "You think this makes you better? But when I'm gone and you're stuck dealing with their expectations, we'll see how long you last." The door slammed behind her. My mother flinched. My father exhaled slowly. I sat there, heart pounding, my hands still pressed to the laptop. Had I gone too far? Was this justice or pure revenge? I didn't know yet. All I knew was that for the first time, the golden child wasn't untouchable anymore. And I was no longer the silent supporting character in her story. I'd written a new script, and everyone had just heard the first act. In the weeks that followed, the silence was almost louder than the fights used to be. No more group texts from my mother gushing about my sister's latest achievement. No more passive-aggressive comparisons slipped into casual conversations. Instead, there were awkward pauses, hesitant calls, and a lot of unspoken questions hanging in the air. My mother struggled with the embarrassment of realizing she'd been bragging about a lie. My father retreated into work more than usual. And me? I tried to remember what my life looked like before $3,200 disappeared from my account every month. The first time my paycheck came in without an automatic transfer scheduled, I just stared at the numbers. It felt unreal. That money had always barely touched my hands before it flew out again. Now it was mine. I sat down with a notebook and wrote out all the things I'd postponed. Paying off my credit card in full, building a real emergency fund, taking a course I wanted, even something as simple as replacing my falling apart laptop. For years, I'd convinced myself that sacrificing those things made me a good sister. Now, I had to ask myself a harder question. Since when did good mean expendable? I started making changes. I paid down debt. I moved a chunk of money into savings and watched the balance rise with a mix of relief and guilt. I said yes to a professional development conference I'd always said no to because things are tight. At work, I volunteered for a big project I'd previously been too exhausted to take on. Without the constant financial pressure and emotional weight of my sister's problems, I suddenly had energy. Energy I hadn't realized I'd been bleeding out of my life. Within a couple of months, my boss called me into her office and offered me a promotion. "You've been carrying more than your share for a while," she said. "We just finally see it clearly now." I almost laughed at the parallel. Meanwhile, my sister's carefully curated life started to crack in public. Not just behind the scenes. Little things showed up first. Fewer glamorous posts, more generic quotes, longer gaps between updates. Then the real signs appeared. A mutual acquaintance mentioned she'd moved out of her expensive apartment. Suddenly someone else said they'd heard she was between places and crashing with a friend. I pretended not to care, but every rumor hit a nerve. Part of me felt vindicated. This was what happened when the truth finally came out. Another part of me still heard her voice saying, "You're happy to watch me fail." One night, my phone lit up with her name after weeks of silence. My heart thudded as I stared at the screen. I let it ring out, then listened to the voicemail. Her voice was small, strained. "Brooke, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need help. Not money, just can we talk, please?" I played it twice, anger and concern wrestling inside me. Was this another performance, or was she actually ready to be honest? If I called back, would I be dragged right back into the same cycle? If I didn't, was I crossing the line from boundary to cruelty? After a long internal battle, I agreed to meet her, but on my terms. A public place. No money, no deals. I chose a quiet cafe, arrived early, and sat by the window. When she walked in, she looked smaller somehow. No polished outfit, no expensive accessories, just a simple sweater and tired eyes. She sat down across from me, clutching her cup. "You look good," she said awkwardly. "You look tired," I replied honestly. She gave a humorless laugh. That's one way to put it. There was a long silence before she finally spoke. "I moved out of the apartment," she admitted. "Couldn't afford it. I'm renting a room now. Sold some stuff. Still owe money." She took a shaky breath. "Mom and Dad won't give me anything unless I come clean and get some boring job that's beneath me." I thought they'd calm down, but they're serious. "You lied to them for years," I said, "and used me to keep the lie going." She winced. "I know. You made sure I'll never forget it." "No," I corrected. "Your choices made sure of that. I just stopped hiding the evidence." She stared at her hands. "I'm applying everywhere now. Real jobs, not just the dream ones. But it's hard to go from golden child to no one's impressed." Her eyes lifted to mine. "Do you have any idea what that feels like?" The question stung because yes, I did. I'd lived my whole life as the less impressive one. The difference was that I'd learned to exist without applause. She was only now realizing the spotlight had a cost. I know exactly what it feels like, I said. The only difference is that when I felt that way, I didn't have a sister secretly paying my bills. She swallowed. I'm not asking you to pay them now, she said quietly. I know you're done. I get it. I messed up. I messed up worse than I even understood until everything fell apart. She hesitated, then added, I just wanted to ask if there's any way you could, at least, not hate me. The honesty in her voice threw me off more than the anger ever did. For a moment, I saw not the golden child, but a scared, flawed person who'd built her life on a lie because she was afraid the truth wouldn't be enough. Was that worth forgiving? Was that my job? Was it possible to have a relationship with her that didn't involve me rescuing her? I don't hate you, I said slowly. I'm still angry. I probably will be for a while. But hate?
No.
What I hate is the way you used me. The way you let them compare us when you knew the truth. The way you turned me into the jealous villain in your story so you could keep playing the hero in theirs. She nodded, eyes glistening. I know, she whispered. And I'm sorry. Not the please fix this for me kind of sorry. Just the real kind. I don't expect you to fix anything. I just didn't want the last version of me in your head to be the one screaming at you in that apartment. I sipped my coffee, thinking, revenge had felt satisfying when I watched the golden child finally fall from her pedestal. But sitting here, I realized something important. My real victory wasn't in her suffering. It was in my freedom. Freedom from funding her lies. Freedom from swallowing my own needs. Freedom from being the invisible daughter. Here's what I can offer, I said at last. I won't give you money.
Not now.
Not a little. Not just this once. If you ask, I'll say no every time. But if you actually do the work, if you get a real job, if you stick with the truth, if you're honest with mom and dad, I'm willing to talk. As sisters, not as your personal bank. She nodded, biting her lip. That's more than I deserve, she said. But I'm grateful. As we parted ways, I felt something strange. Not the clean, sharp satisfaction of revenge, but a heavier, quieter sense of closure beginning to form. This wasn't about making her pay anymore. Life had already started doing that. This was about finally choosing myself without apologizing for it. On the walk home, one question kept circling in my mind. If you grew up being told someone else was the golden child, what do you do when their crown finally falls? Step in and fix it for them, or finally let them feel the weight of their own choices? The silence after my announcement was almost funny. My mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. My dad stared at his plate like the mashed potatoes were going to give him answers. And my successful and responsible sister went white. For a second, nobody breathed. Then Natasha snapped, "You can't just cut me off like that." In this thin, high voice I'd never heard from her before, like all that polished confidence had been nothing but a costume she forgot to zip up in the back. I leaned back in my chair and repeated very calmly, "My $3,200 monthly transfers end today.
Right now.
Consider this your last free meal from me." My mom finally found her voice, but it wasn't directed at me this time. "What is she talking about, Natasha?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "What transfers?" For years, I'd been the one under that interrogation light. This time, I just sat there and watched the spotlight swing to the golden child. Natasha tried to laugh it off, that fake little chuckle she always used when she was cornered. "She's exaggerating."
Mom.
"She likes to make things dramatic." I opened my banking app, turned the screen toward my parents, and slid the phone across the table. Line after line of identical payments, same date, same amount, same name. "Dramatic," I said quietly. "That's $3,200 every month for over 2 years. All while you bragged about how independent you were." My mom's hand flew to her chest. "Is this true?" she asked Natasha, her voice trembling. "You told us you were making a very high salary. You told us you didn't need any help from anyone." Natasha's shoulders sagged like someone had cut invisible strings.
I
just needed time to get things going," she muttered. "The clients weren't paying on time. Rent is insane. Everyone gets help. Brooke could afford it. That last sentence came out like an accusation, as if my ability to budget was an insult to her. Could I? I shot back. Do you have any idea what that money cost me? The promotions I turned down because I was too exhausted from side gigs. The trips I didn't take. The years of my life I spent working late so you could maintain your little illusion. My dad finally spoke up, his voice low and deadly calm. What illusion exactly? Because from where I'm sitting, you've been lying to all of us. And then it all started spilling out. Not from me, from her. Once the mask slipped, it didn't just crack, it shattered. The home office she bragged about was a rented co-working space she barely went to. The brand deals were unpaid collaborations, and a lot of pretending. The business investments were a designer wardrobe, overpriced dinners, impulse trips, and debt. So much debt. I didn't want to look like a failure, she said, eyes glittering with tears. You two always believed in me. You called me talented, special, destined for more. And you, she glared at me, you always had everything under control. You never needed help. So why is it so wrong that I did? I stared at her, stunned by the twisted logic. Needing help isn't wrong, I said slowly. Lying about needing help is. Using me as your silent bank is. Letting mom compare me to you while my money kept your fantasy alive. That's not help, Natasha. That's exploitation. My mother turned to her, and for the first time in my life, I watched her look at Natasha the way she had always looked at me. Disappointed. Do you have any idea how many times I scolded your sister? She whispered. How many times I told her to be more like you? I defended you. I bragged about you. And this whole time, you were living off her. Natasha broke then. Really broke. Not the pretty, camera-friendly tears she used to practice in the mirror, but the ugly sobs you can't filter or edit. She reached for me, fingers shaking. Please, just give me a few more months. I swear I'll fix everything.
I'll get a real job.
I'll cut back. I just need a cushion while I figure things out. There it was. The script. The familiar plea. The same loop I'd been stuck in for years. Only this time, something in me stayed still. No rush of guilt, no instinct to save her. Just a clear, quiet certainty. No, I said. I'm done being your cushion. I'm done being your secret safety net. If you want a real life, you're going to have to build it yourself. So that's it, she choked out. You're going to ruin me to make a point? I'm not ruining you, I replied. I'm just stepping out of the way and letting your choices catch up. We didn't finish dinner. My dad stood up and walked out to the backyard without another word. My mom stayed at the table, staring at the payment history on my phone like it was evidence in a crime scene. Natasha kept saying my name like it was a spell that used to work and suddenly didn't. I picked up my keys, looked at my mother, and asked the one question I'd been swallowing for years. Am I still the irresponsible one? She didn't answer. That silence was all the answer I needed. Months passed. The fallout wasn't dramatic in the cinematic way. No screaming in the rain. No disowning speeches. It was quieter, heavier. My mother stopped starting sentences with, your sister. She called me instead. Sometimes just to ask how work was going. Sometimes to ask simple things like, are you eating enough? Are you sleeping? Little questions she'd never bothered to ask before. My dad invited me over to fix a leaky faucet and for once thanked me instead of reminding me how lucky I was to be so capable. Natasha moved out of her glossy apartment when the unpaid bills finally outnumbered the excuses. She downsized to a cramped place in a not-so-Instagrammable neighborhood. She took an actual job. Nothing glamorous, just an entry-level position where no one cared about her follower count. I know because she texted me once, a photo of her in a basic uniform, hair pulled back, captioned, "First real paycheck." It's tiny. It's mine. I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to say, I'm proud of you. Another part of me remembered the years of overdrafts and panic attacks and late-night budgeting, so I could keep both of us afloat while she smiled for the camera. In the end, I just replied, good.
Keep going.
My $3,200 monthly transfers never resumed, not once. She tried a couple more times. Soft attempts at manipulation dressed up as apologies. If you lend me just 1 month, I can finally clear this card. If you co-sign this, I'll be set. Each time, I reminded her, no more money, no more secrets. If we're going to have a relationship, it has to be honest, and it has to be free. She didn't like that answer, but she stopped asking. As for me, without that financial leash around my neck, my life expanded in ways I hadn't realized it was shrinking. I paid off my own debt. I stopped working ridiculous overtime just to make room for her emergencies. I took a trip I'd postponed for 3 years, not to flex online, but to actually rest. I started therapy, and for the first time I said out loud, I'm angry that I was the invisible one. I'm angry that love in my family was tied to performance and image. My therapist asked, do you feel guilty about what happened to Natasha? I thought about her small apartment, her basic job, her empty calendar where brand meetings used to be scribbled. And then I thought about how it all began with a choice. Her choice to build a life on lies, and my choice over and over to fund it. I feel sad, I admitted. But I don't feel guilty. I didn't destroy her life. I just stopped sacrificing mine to hold hers together. Sometimes revenge isn't a dramatic explosion. Sometimes it's quieter. You stop playing your assigned role, and you let the golden child face reality without your hands propping up their crown. Is that cruel? Or is that finally fair? I still see Natasha at family events. The air between us is different now. Less glitter, more truth. She looks tired, but also more real. She doesn't brag as much. She doesn't post everything. She still avoids talking about those years when my bank account kept her fantasy alive. And my mom, she doesn't compare us anymore. Occasionally, she'll look at me with a softness I don't quite know how to accept and say, you've always been so strong, Brooke. I don't correct her. I just smile and think, I finally used that strength for myself. Do I think Natasha can truly change? I don't know. People can learn, sure, but some are addicted to the image more than the reality. So for now, my boundary stands. No more money, no more secrets, no more pretending. She can build her own life, brick by honest brick, or she can chase another illusion. That's her choice. Mine was to step out of her shadow and stop financing my own erasure. If you were in my place, would you have exposed your sibling to the whole family like I did? Would you ever forgive someone who used your love as their ATM? Or would you cut them off for good?